Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and we're finally a few episodes into the book of Boba Fett, and I'm finally starting to figure out who exactly this guy is. This is a wiser and older version of the bounty hunter we were all introduced to in the original trilogy. Gone are the impulsive behaviors, the emotions, and other young men things that can really get you into trouble. Boba Fett is now in his 40s, and it looks like he got a lot more wear and tear than Jango did, who was also in his 40s when he died. Now Boba Fett sleeps in a bacta tank and carries around a Tusken walking stick for support, and he kind of looks like he's more in his 60s than he does in his 40s. And so now Boba Fett's brain is his most important weapon, and he'll have to rely on that far more than he did before. Individuals like Boba Fett, who have seen a lot of chaos, destruction, and death in his life, can turn out in two different ways. One, they can become extremely defensive and only care for themselves, or two, they can begin to nurture and grow everything around them to create happiness, safety, and security for all. Boba Fett seems to be leaning towards the latter. He's approaching everyone, enemies or friends, with open arms. This really does go against the advice of his closest advisors, Assassin Fennec Shand and his torture droid 8D8. They both want him to mercilessly kill his enemies to set an example, just like the Hutts did. While some criminals might see Boba Fett's kindness and passive behavior as a sign of weakness, I believe what Boba Fett is doing here is actually showing the ultimate strength. He does not fear others, and therefore feels no need to preemptively strike out like a little bitch. I mean, it helps when you have a suit of armor made out of Beskar that's indestructible, but what Boba Fett is trying very hard to do here is not make any more enemies than he needs to. When you've lived your entire life in such danger and chaos, well, you begin to understand that small actions can cascade into much larger actions in the future. Especially if you end up killing someone. You might not feel the consequences immediately, but 1 year or 5 years down the road, it might come back to haunt you. Today, we'll be taking a look at some of the major decisions Boba Fett has made as a crime lord on Tatooine, and we'll discuss how these decisions are both courageous and also quite intelligent. The Gamorreans are clearly day one ride or die homies. I mean, sure, they're half naked, and they're green pigs who use melee weapons in a world full of blasters and Death Stars, but there's something awesome about having two Gamorrean bros watch your back as you stride around town collecting protection money. But let's not forget that these two Gamorreans try to fight to the death for their former employee, Jabba the Hutt, and then also for Bib Fortuna. Boba Fett's droid 8D8 actually recommended he torture them to instill fear into the hearts of his enemies. Luckily, Fett didn't listen to his droid, who had a history of torturing other droids and sadism. And because Boba Fett was kind enough to save the Gamorrean bros, they saved Boba Fett's life twice already, once from the Nightwind Assassins and once from the Black Chrysanthemum. And after one of the Gamorreans has a chunk of pork shoulder taken from him by the Black Chrysanthemum, who was hungry, Boba Fett even has him placed inside of his own bacta tank, which is really just a great move for a leader. You can either rule through fear and coin like the Hutts did, but that's kind of just lazy and not really a good long-term solution. But I guess when you live for 1,000 years, you get lazy when it comes to management. Or you can do as Boba Fett does and inspire your men to follow you because they actually like who you are because you show that you care for them. It's actually a very simple concept, but usually psychopaths who seek leadership positions were not taught that at a young age, which is why they're such broken toys. And of course, this is a wise move. If your enforcers trust you, you won't need to micromanage your thugs or keep them in constant fear to make sure they do the right thing, like the Hutts do. Instead, your thugs will just work hard for you and die for you out of appreciation for who you are. It's a better strategy. Boba Fett was not treated well by the Tusken Raiders. They captured him and basically tied him down for days and beat the crap out of him multiple times. Most people in Boba Fett's situation would either completely lose touch with reality and lose their minds and eventually perish, or become bitter and angry over their captivity and begin to plot their revenge. Boba Fett instead did something that I don't think most people would do. He just sat down and observed the Tusken people. He didn't take what was happening to him personally. He had seen enough warrior races to understand that he was just a victim of circumstance. The Tusken Raider society is clearly not advanced far enough to contemplate the humane treatment of captives. They just don't have the resources for it. Boba Fett began to admire the Tusken Raiders for their tenacity, and he also began seeing things for what they really were. I swear this isn't Stockholm Syndrome or anything like that. The Tusken Raiders stood in the face of cruel modernization that was brought to Tatooine by off-world forces. The Tusken Raiders fought to preserve their way of life, something that Boba Fett could really respect. And so on that day when Boba Fett and a Rodian prisoner is being marched along the sand dunes by a Tusken child, Boba Fett had every opportunity to run when a gigantic four-armed sand monster attacks them. Instead of running though, Boba Fett pulls a Leia and chokes the much larger beast to death. Upon doing this, Boba Fett is adopted by the tribe and actually shown the Tusken way. And in return, Boba Fett helps the Tuskens stop a Pike Syndicate train from blasting through their territory. It's a great mutual exchange, and both parties do benefit from the situation. Unfortunately, all of the Tuskens in that tribe were massacred, most likely by a Nikto speeder bike gang shortly after, so the Tuskens won't be able to help out Boba Fett as much when the Pike Syndicate come back to town with a full army. But once again, it was Boba Fett thinking outside of the box, not letting his emotions or hatred or despair get to him. Instead, he thought rationally and coolly, used his critical thinking, and made friends with the Tusken Raiders and learned a lot of important skills about surviving in the desert as a result. Boba Fett continues to surprise us when he runs into a gang of young delinquents in Mos Espa who totally are rocking an old 1960s Earth scooter gang vibe. Boba Fett, being from an older generation, could have gone all boomer on them and made fun of their stupid-looking speeders and weird augmentations and prosthetics. He could have also just killed them all for stealing water from the local watermongerer, who had petitioned for him to do something about the situation earlier that day. But Boba Fett remains calm, and he talks things through with the cyberpunk gang. Turns out that the watermongerer was charging way too much for water, and at the same time there was no work to be had for the gang. So that's why they were stealing water. Ever since Jabba the Hutt died, things had grown increasingly chaotic on the planet and on Mos Espa. And so, what does Boba Fett do? He pays off the watermongerer at a fair price that he determines himself, which adequately resolves the complaints from the watermongerer, and then he hires the scooter gang and actually has them watch his back. Later that night, they actually save his life from the Black Chrysanthemum, along with the Gamorrean bros we just talked about. And the next day, they're able to chase down the mayor's major domo to extract info from him, and another cyberpunk bro even manages to spy on a shipment of Pike Syndicate soldiers coming to town. And this is all because Boba Fett showed respect to a bunch of street urchins who honestly didn't deserve any respect in the first place. But Boba Fett understands that kids will be kids and that new trends will come and go. What matters is how capable are they in a gunfight. You see, because Boba Fett approaches all of these situations with such a level head, he doesn't miss potential opportunities to find allies or make some more money. This makes him an extremely competent leader. I mean, he even goes out of his way not to offend one of his new soldiers who has one eye.
Keep an eye on them. Sorry, it's an expression.
You don't have to be sorry, mate. I paid a lot for this. Proud of my eye.
The Black Chrysanthemum is Chewbacca if he were a raging psychopathic killer with no control over his impulses. Boba Fett has actually worked alongside the Black Chrysanthemum, and they got a bit of history together. And so Boba Fett knows that having the Black Chrysanthemum hunting him down is a terrible thing. Luckily, he and his minions managed to trap the beast in his Rancor pit. Now, Boba could have killed the Wookiee then and there. The Black Chrysanthemum was exiled from Kashyyyk in disgrace, and had very few individuals who actually cared about him or kept in touch with him. As a matter of fact, no one probably would have missed the Wookiee if he just disappeared. As a matter of fact, when Boba Fett tries to return the Black Chrysanthemum back to the Hutt twins the next day, they just tell Boba Fett to sell him back to the gladiator pits once again. That's where the Black Chrysanthemum used to work, as a slave. But instead, Boba Fett frees the Black Chrysanthemum. There's no hard feelings, no life debt, no demands. He just lets the Wookiee who almost killed him the night before go away. He even gives him some advice about not taking jobs from skugholes. Boba Fett and the Black Chrysanthemum kind of get each other. They belong to a very small and elite group of top-tier bounty hunters. And while not all of these bounty hunters got along, Boba Fett clearly had respect for the Wookiee. I hope his charity towards the Black Chrysanthemum will pay off one day, just like how his other kind actions have also brought him more allies and friends to watch his back. Because now that he has an intergalactic drug-dealing operation coming to Tatooine, he'll need all the help he can get to fight them off. So there you have it, guys. That is my analysis of Boba Fett. I think he's a great leader up until this point. He's taken a lot of terrible situations, which are basically assassination attempts, and turned them into beneficial outcomes somehow. It's really amazing. And I hope Boba Fett continues doing this so that he can actually bring some stability to this hellhole known as Tatooine. Well, guys, let me know in the comment section below what you think about Boba Fett's leadership abilities so far. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.